Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of Turch Tidbits Book Preview Edition. And this week we are featuring tidbits from two books. Yes, two books. First is The Essential Smart Football by Chris Brown. This will be the third and final episode featuring Brown's book, and notes for this show as well as the first two shows are at my website as always, turchtidbits.com. We're going to focus on a chapter entitled Gary Kubiak, Alex Gibbs, and the Greatest Run Play in Modern Football, and then later on bring in Howard Mudd's great book, The View from the O-Line. So what is the described greatest run play, quote unquote? Outside zone. Zone running is one of the least understood aspect, or misunderstood aspects, I should say, of the NFL game for the modern fan. So let's dive right in. Starting off in the beginning of the chapter from Brown's book, going to the text here. When Shanahan went to Denver in 1995, he brought his West Coast passing plays with him and enlisted Kubiak to help teach them to quarterback John Elway, but he introduced a different run offense from Bill Walsh's traditional West Coast playbook. Shanahan cast his fortunes with a blocking scheme that had begun taking over the NFL, and to do it made his most important hire. He hired offensive line coach Alex Gibbs to install a zone blocking running game. Okay, here we've been playing some tape from that Denver team back in the day with Terrell Davis at running back and John Elway at quarterback. I removed the audio. Gibbs is actually giving a clinic, and I'll include the YouTube link to that clinic in the show notes. It's a great way to spend 8 minutes of your day. Gibbs demanded perfection from all 11 players in the running game, and it certainly had the profanity, to prove it. Going back to the text, though, the outside zone is more about the lateral movement. Each blocker first steps to the side rather than forward, and many coaches teach their linemen to take their first step backward, a technique referred to as losing ground to gain ground. The blockers then try to pin defenders to the inside, or if they can't do that, drive them to the sideline. Sometimes on these plays, the running back runs around the edge on a traditional looking sweep. More often, like in this example, the defense is stretched to its limit, and the runner hits a crease and then sprints straight toward the end zone. When executed correctly, it's extremely taxing on the defense, as all their instincts, aggressiveness to the ball carrier, and fast pursuit work against them. Okay, we chose an outside zone run this year from the Rams against the rival Seahawks, where Gurley cuts back after the offensive line creates lateral movement. But as we rewind it and then let it play again to see where the formation originated from, he's not cutting back against the grain as much as many commentators would have you think. He's actually cutting back in the C gap just outside the tackle's left shoulder where he started from. Now I'm not going to dive into all the technical aspects in this video in terms of the line calls and the wrinkles to all defensive fronts that exist for outside zone, but outside zone is found in every NFL offense. For McVay and the Rams, it's not as foundational as it is for, say, rival 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan, whose dad is Mike Shanahan, that we mentioned before. But it's a staple, especially when you have a runner with vision like Todd Gurley. Going back to the Brown text, the offense is also taxing on coaches. Gibbs will tell anyone willing to listen that if you want to be good at the wide zone and the tight zone, throw out all of your other run plays. All those wonderful power O plays, counter trade plays, whatever other fancy stuff that you think you need, get rid of it. Instead, run two run plays and run them against every defensive front you face until you get really good at them. To Gibbs, anything else is hubris. Okay, so the compliment that Brown describes to the outside zone is the inside zone. Again, saving the technicals for the show notes in terms of how the blocks are executed, i.e. line calls, etc. Inside zone, when run to the weak side, often features a double team block on the backside. Showing some examples here where the backside block is so important. It exposes a crease for backs with solid vision, even though the direction of this run is to the weak side, like we said, which is Deion Jones's side. And really the key block, like we said, is against Poe, who gives up a lot of ground here, opening with crease and puts a ton of pressure on Levy to make really a pretty perfect play. And we see running back Mark Ingram make the initial read, then bouncing it out to the outside and basically taking it to the house. So this play, although it's labeled inside zone, it can be bounced to the outside after gaining ground and really can exploit defenses for devastating effects. That was a good example. Here we have an okay example. This is the same game, inside zone to the weak side, this time out of 12 personnel and against the 5-1 front. So it's 5-1 nickel front, so it's It's not apples to apples by any stretch of the imagination. This is Devonta Freeman, who, in my opinion, is one of the best zone runners in the league. But here he runs to the weak side and doesn't really pick up on the slight or much smaller crease that exists on the backside. But anyway, he goes for a 2-yard gain here. Not really a poor example, just not as good as the other one. And oftentimes it's in kind of the minutia details where, not minutia, in the details here what makes the difference between a touchdown and a 2-yard gain. Okay, so reading this chapter kind of makes you think that Gibbs invented the zone scheme in the early 90s and explodes in the early 2000s, expanding teams like Atlanta, where Gibbs actually went to coach with Michael Vick there, and he helped steer that rushing attack in the right direction. What's more important to understand, though, is that offensive line coaches have been dealing with zone blocking for a much longer time than that. Howard Mudd's book, View from the O-Line, is a great work describing Mudd's career as both a player and a coach. Just really quickly on Mudd's background, he was an NFL player. He retires. He spends 2 years as an assistant coach at Cal. Then he goes to the NFL as a coach, going up and down the West Coast. The Chargers, 49ers, Seahawks, and Cleveland Browns and KC Chiefs, but up until about 1997. Then 1998, he goes to the Colts for 12 years, longest stint in his career, his coaching career, and really kind of his most famous stint, just because obviously Peyton Manning's there and that offensive juggernaut that existed there for such a long time. The strength of Mudd's book is really the interviews from players he coached, and their take on both what Mudd had his players doing and what life was like in the trenches. Zeroing in, though, in a chapter entitled New Idea, Old Concept, Mudd describes his time with the Seahawks as an O-line coach in the late 70s and the early 80s. And here we go to the book. We were seeing a lot more of the 3-4 defenses in 1978. Teams were stunting into gaps, complicating man blocking assignments. We continued man blocking, but we did it in a passive way. He goes on to, for a couple paragraphs, describing the passive way and how the issues playing two-gap defensive fronts, it's not really working out as to perfection yet. So he goes to Cleveland in 1983 as a coach, and he continues to try to perfect this. Going back to this, the text here, I believed we could use the double team at the point of attack, letting the inside blocker move after contact at the second level to pick up a linebacker. But we didn't know if the man we might otherwise have been assigned to is going to shoot a gap inside, outside, just lock up on our guy, or drop into coverage in a fire zone blitz. So we take the defenders as we found them. The 5 linemen move in unison, like elephants in a circus grabbing the tail of the one in front with his trunk. We moved as if on a track to a landmark rather than a designated man. We wanted to leave at the snap with everyone's shoulders at the same angle. That includes the ball carrier. Okay, so that is obviously zone blocking scheme described. And the key, though, is, or I would say the contrast is where Gibbs' roots come in zone, and where Mudd is solving the problem that the defense has presented to his teams and perfecting that problem that he sees over and over again. You know, the early 80s, you're talking about LT and the guys like the New York Giants under Bill Belichick running that 3-4, LT stunting, a large percentage of the time. So a lot of teams are doing this. So offensive line coaches have to react. And so I pulled an example. This is just the Bills to show what or how executing, if this was a man scheme, how difficult this would be with this stunt. The end loops in first, and then then basically the linebacker is responsible for the alley running to the outside. So, just defenses, or the fronts, are getting more and more complicated. Man is not as easy to handle those issues. So although they're coming at it from different angles a little bit, the conclusion is really the same. The entire unit moves together, and the read presents itself to the ball carrier, and is very difficult to defend. He also agrees that mastering these two types of running plays is really all you need to be successful. Okay, so later in the chapter, Mudd describes his time in Indy, and just along that theme of mastering two types of running plays, here we are, back to the text. In Indianapolis, we really pared the running plays down to a handful. It was consistent with doing a few things and doing them extraordinarily well. We didn't see the need to have hundreds of running plays. I believed in excelling by simplifying things. When something goes wrong, there's less to fix, right? You don't have to create a new play, just run the ones you know better. All great offenses operate that way. Okay, so taking a great offense, the Dallas Cowboys here running inside zone to the strong side. The problem of this front, the 6-man front, is that there's probably 6 guys coming, especially the way this looks, and for inside zone. And again, I didn't really get into all this earlier, But as all these offensive linemen are covered, this is inside zone turns into basically base blocking, and so it gets more simple as things become more difficult almost. So here we go. And there are complications. There are wrinkles in how these guys in their technique. It's not just super simple. So we see Ezekiel Elliott as the tape rolls here. Starts to the left, finds that crease that we talked about from the right guard, managing to turn his guy to the inside. And Ezekiel Elliott, as usual, opportunistically blasts through the hole with a great acceleration. And look, he takes it to the house. So I didn't include some of the better parts of this chapter, which include the quotes from guys like monsters of the trenches, guys like Jeff Saturday, Tariq Glenn, Evan Mathis, Tony Baselli. They're all talking zone blocking in this chapter, and it's great. And the whole point is for everyone to go out and go get the book yourself. It's a great read, and the quotes obviously from those players all have to be read in the context. You got to read all the sections. It's awesome, and look, it's not a very glorified part of the game. You're not seeing highlight reels of how the deuce block created the scene for the star running back to break north and get the key first down or key touchdown in this case. That we showed with Dallas. But this is real football, and this book is not super technical. It's it's not super. It's got a good balance of technicals with anecdotes. So it's a great read, and it's really cool to dive into. So please check out both Brown and Mudd's link in our show notes. Yes, these show notes go directly to Amazon, and yes, we do get a cut if you buy the book. Look, got to pay the bills around here somehow, and I don't see any better way to do that with by promoting great football books. It's kind of right in my wheelhouse. So anyway, thanks again, guys, and cheers, and go check out those books.